2017. We're all ready to go, Mr. Chairman.
Roll call.
John Bogart.
Here.
Evelyn Mascona.
Here.
Charlotte McNair. Doug Sheehan. Ed Chester. John Zimmerman. Ivan Adorno. Tracy Caparo.
Here.
Sue McElligott.
Here.
John Cox.
Here.
Nancy Paul.
Public announcement, Open Public Meeting Act.
Please be advised that those requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act is applied with and satisfied which the annual notice with sufficient notice of the time, place, and conduct of all public meetings of the Board of Adjustment of the City of New Brunswick, and filed with the City Clerk, placed in the appropriate form or lobby of City Hall, 78 Fire Street, New Brunswick, New Jersey, to transmit as the official newspaper of the City of New Brunswick, named the Home News Tribune and the Star Wars.
Salute to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes of the Board, February 27, 2017 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, all members receive copies of the minutes in their packets. If there's no additions or changes, a motion to approve will be ordered.
All in favor? Opposed? Minutes are good.
Communication and reports, resolutions of memorialization of approval. A, 139 Sedan Street LLC, Z-2016-06, variance application for construction of a two-family residential dwelling located at 139 Sedan Street, block 158, lot 14, zoning district R-5A.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, members received copies of the,
Actually, I received a phone call from the attorney regarding this matter. There was a certification that we were supposed to provide him as well. He's indicated that he wishes not to have that memorialized this evening in his cafeteria, pending the receipt of the certification.
okay. Move on to the next one.
All right. David Beekes, Z-2016-11, variance application for construction of addition to an existing single-family dwelling located at 278 Comstock Street, block 220, lot 33, zoning district R-5A.
The available members to vote are Sheehan, Caparo, McElligott, and Cox.
Need a motion from one of those members and a second.
Motion to approve. Doug Sheehan.
Yes.
Tracy Caparo.
Yes.
Sue McElligott.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Good.
91 Management Inc., Z-2016-013, variance application for the addition of bedrooms to a single-family dwelling located at 93 Richardson Street, block 88, lot 9.01, zoning district R4.
Same members.
Actually, Mr. Cox voted no on that one because he was not eligible. So Ms. McElligott, Mr. Caparo, and Mr. Sheehan are eligible.
Yeah, make a motion.
Second. Doug Sheehan.
Yes.
Tracy Caparo.
Yes.
Sue McElligott.
Yes.
Annual report of the zoning board of adjustment, review of the variances granted by the city of New Brunswick zoning board of adjustment during 2016 calendar year in accordance with NJSA 40:55D-70.1 of the municipal land use law.
Okay, this is the report that we had last month, and this just memorializes your approval of it, so we can distribute that. So this is a motion, and anybody who see last month can make that motion.
Make a motion.
All second.
Doug Sheehan.
Yes.
Tracy Caparo.
Yes.
Sue McElligott.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes. New business, Hoffman Housing Associates, LLC, Z-2017-01, amendment site plan and variance application for the construction of an 8 restricted multi-unit building located at 75 Nelson Street, block 106.02, lot 1.03, zoning district R-6.
Mr. Chairman, just before we proceed, one of the members wanted to put on the record that she had a conflict with this application. You just want to state what your conflict is.
Because I am a member of the church.
And she's a member of Mount Zion Church, and a number of parishioners are here from the church as objectors. Like there's case law on that go home. There's nothing else on, so you have to get up to the table. Whatever the table is.
Members of the board, Thomas F. Kelso, on behalf of the applicant, Hoffman Housing Associates, as I had indicated, my client, Hoffman Housing Associates, which is a subsidiary entity of Penrose Properties, is seeking from the board this evening preliminary and final major site plan approval with variances for purposes of developing a new 7-story, 66-unit mid-rise age-restricted residential building. The building will contain 61 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedroom units. The ground floor contains office, utility, and community room, plus 14 parking spaces. The property, as indicated in the notification, is at 75 Wilson Street, and as the board is probably aware, that property is owned by the Housing Authority of the City of Brunswick. Just a little background for this project. The board, I know all the members, I think, that are here this evening, by and large, were not here in 2010, except for Mr. Cox. And that in 2010, my client did receive approval from this board to develop a 72-unit project on this site with variances for use variance, height variance, and an FAR variance, which are the D variances, and then a series of bulk variances, including a parking variance, the same as which is being requested this evening. So this board did find a basis for granting those approvals with the variances. We're here asking the board to reestablish those variances, to reaffirm them, so that this project can now proceed to request funding for tax credit financing, which is why the previous project did not proceed in 2010 because of the scoring criteria of the state, and this was not funded by the state in 2010. The project itself, many of the members of the city know that this is the site where used to be located the Hoffman Pavilion. The Hoffman Pavilion was a building that was owned and operated by the Housing Authority. It was a public housing project located on the Housing Authority public property land. Since the time of the demolition of all of the Memorial Homes project, including the Hoffman Pavilion, the site has remained unutilized. It's always been the intention of the Housing Authority to reestablish those public housing units and the balance of affordable units on that site. Hence the reason we were here in 2010 and why we're back this evening. The developer at that time was Penrose Properties. The Housing Authority selected Penrose Properties because of their experience in this type of housing, this type of financing, we are actually here this evening for the same purpose. And the land itself will continue to be held by the Housing Authority. It is federally funded HUD property. And the project would be accomplished through the mechanism of a long-term ground lease, so that the land would continue to be owned by the Housing Authority, but the project would be built, financed, constructed, and managed by Penrose Properties through this LLC. Again, so we're kind of coming back, deja vu, if you will, to look at this project. We think there has been some opportunity for us because we've been able to make some changes that I think make the building better, make the layouts better. We also believe that overall the scoring criteria that is now changed with the state makes this project very competitive for financing. But we are on a very tight timeline for that purpose, so hence the reason we are here this evening. I did indicate that there are a series of bulk variances. I believe that for the most part, the major variances are the ones that were actually approved at the last hearing, except that the FAR is actually less. The building height is the same, the use obviously is the same. The FAR has changed slightly because the unit count that we are asking for is reduced from what was requested in 2010. There are variances for lot width, lot depth, which is the result of their actually existing conditions. And there are setback variance requested for Nielsen Street, the Hildebrand Way, to accommodate the location of the building. And that really fits within where the building was previously being operated. There is a building coverage variance similar to what was approved previously, and also an impervious coverage variance that is slightly higher than what it was previously, but essentially the result of having to do some work around the culvert that runs underneath the roadway. And Mr. Cox may remember there was a long discussion about that culvert in 2010. We also are seeking some variances for signage, although the name of the building has not been finalized at this point in time. We know that the size of the signage will exceed the required amount, so once that's finalized, the name, we're making signage that will be able to clearly identify the building as such. My intention is to call 4 witnesses for you this evening. We will call representative of Penrose Properties to give you a little idea of the background as I've laid it out for you a little bit, but also the basis for tenancies, the income restrictions, things that I think people have an interest in, but are largely driven by the housing authority's needs as well as what the HMFA finances. I will also call, as we would typically do, our civil engineer to provide site planning statistical analysis for you. I also will have our architect to talk about the building, and I'll be able to show you a rendering of what the current building will look like. And then again, finally, I will call our professional planners to provide planning testimony in support of the variances. So that essentially is an overview of the project, and unless anybody has questions for me, I'll call my first witness.
Hey, Tom, I just have one question, please. Is your statement still going to say a 7-story building, or is I know, Big Mill report is saying it's going to be reduced to a 6-story building?
It's actually it's 1 story less than what was there previously, but it's the same height. It's 6 stories of residential with now parking.
Okay.
It's a little misleading, but.
Sure, I just wanted to clarify,
Yeah.
that's all. Okay. Thank you.
I do have one question, if I may. Actually, a couple of questions. First, the applicant now, is it the same applicant?
Yes.
In 2010?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if this would just be an amended application to change some of the details, and it's actually making it smaller in scope.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So the approvals that you received in 2010, I'm not sure why this wouldn't be continuing under the New Jersey Permit Extension Act.
I would agree with you. We were being conservative in the submission of the application, since when we initially submitted it, considering it to be a new application. But yes, the reality is the Permit Extension Act probably extended those variances that were already approved, which is the reason why I refer to them as reaffirming those variances. But I think and I don't think, with knowing that the board has already approved those D variances already, and the parking variance in particular, I do believe the Permit Extension Act does cover it. The distinction, as a practical matter, for an applicant, whether it's an amended application or new, we're still paying the same amount of fees, which is always the practical consideration when an applicant comes, whether you refer to it as amended. So I defer to your opinion as you give it to the board, but I would certainly agree. I think those variances are actually still valid. So, but I think it's helpful for the board to be able to approve a site plan, to understand the variances, to hear them again, to recognize what had been approved previously and judge it based on that.
Some of the site layout is a little different, how
Yes.
parking works and so
Correct.
forth, so it's not the same footprint exactly.
Correct.
So I think we refer to it as an amended site plan on the agenda.
Yeah.
That's how we're referring to it.
So in the end, we actually, because I recognize here we have 6 members rather than 7 members, that group could actually play into the issue of whether or not the D variances are considered to be still valid. Something to consider while you're sitting here and I'll be contesting that. Okay. Did you have any other questions? Is that it?
I think that my initial advice to the board would be that D variances are still controlling. If there are any bulk variances that are different, and you can certainly put on testimony as to differences in site layout that would require these bulk variances to be different. I think that under the New Jersey Permit Extension Act of 2010, as it was extended, that the applicant's rights are locked in.
And again, the 1D variance that changed is reduced. So, which is the FAR. We will proceed with testimony complete so that it's still sort of in the record again, but recognizing that the D variances are considered to be still affects voting too, so it's a factor for us to consider.
Sure. Wait, first witness.
At this time, I would call Mr. Noah Freiberg for testimony.
No, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Noah Freiberg, Freiberg.
And you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Noah, you are a representative of Penrose Property, is that correct?
Yes,
And in that capacity, you're familiar with the application that's before the board this evening for review?
yes.
And you are, how long have you been with Penrose?
I've been with Penrose just about going on 5 years.
And this project has been your project for, so you're familiar with all aspects of it?
Correct.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is just give the board, I gave a little bit of a background, but I would ask you to go through the background of how we've gotten back there after a number of years and to talk a little bit about the process by which this if the project were to be approved, would be going for financing, a little bit about tenant selection, how that happens, the income restrictions, and the age restriction associated with it. And then I'm going to also ask you to go through a little bit about management items, and I'll let you go and kind of go through this also, but go smoothly rather than ask you specific questions.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, again, my name is Noah Freiberg. I'm a developer with Penrose Properties. We're a 40-year-old privately held development company based out of Philadelphia. We have offices in Boston, New York, Baltimore, and Tennessee. Penrose has developed approximately 15,000 units in approximately 200 communities. About 1,000 of those units have been developed in Middlesex. 750 of those have been developed right here in the city of New Brunswick. And of those 750, about 250 of those have been affordable developments. So we do have experience in the city developing affordable properties. Penrose was procured by the New Brunswick Housing Authority in 2009 for the redevelopment of multiple public housing projects, including the Hoffman Pavilion project. In 2010, Penrose and the Housing Authority demolished the Hoffman Pavilion structure that Mr. Kessel referenced earlier after the residents were relocated to other properties. The plan for the redevelopment of that project has been another 100% affordable development project. The financing structure by which that project was to be developed is the 9% low-income housing tax credit. The 9% tax credit is a federal program by which the states allocate credits annually through the state by various state criteria that the states are allowed to define, based on what's going on in their own state. And the reason this project has not come to fruition from when it received initial approval up till today, when we're coming back to you, is that the state criteria has not been favorable to the senior project in the city of New Brunswick. And so we've made a couple of attempts at financing, but due to the high competition on the program and the points that are awarded to the project, we haven't been successful. The reason this project is this program is so competitive is that the credits provide approximately 70 to 75% of the capital that a project would need in order to develop the project. And really, without that credit, affordable project of this scale just isn't feasible through conventional financing. So really, that's affordable housing at that scale gets done today. So a little bit about this particular project that we're coming back with. The Hoffman project is located, as Mr. Kelso mentioned, on the corner of Nielsen and Hildebrand, where the old project was demolished. The new project will be a one building, 6-story elevator building with 66 units. It will have 65 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedroom units.
60.
That's
The number of one-bedroom units?
What did I say?
You said 65.
61 one-bedroom units and 5 two-bedroom units, for a total of 66 units. One bedroom unit will be located on the ground floor for a superintendent that will live at the project 24/7, a member of Penrose's management company, affiliated management company, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The property will have some things such as open floor plan, modern kitchen, large closets, resident controlled heating and cooling, a community room on the ground floor for the implementation of a wide array of supportive services, which I'll also talk about. Laundry facilities will be located on each floor for the residents, and there will be on-site management that I will discuss also. As a 100% tax credit project, all of the residents that will live in the building will be income restricted to 60% of the area median income or less, which for Middlesex County is approximately $45,000 for a one-bedroom unit and about $56,000 for a two-bedroom unit. However, working with the Housing Authority, about 75% of these units are going to be Housing Authority subsidized units, either through the HUD operating subsidy or through project-based units. And what that means is that the majority of the residents that live there will be of very low income, typically 30% or less of AMI, and that's somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 per unit. Penrose has an affiliated management company called Penrose Management Company. They manage about 9,000 of the 50,000 units that Penrose has developed. Each property that Penrose develops is staffed with full-time residents. We have a full-time property manager, a full-time maintenance superintendent, and a full-time maintenance porter. Additionally, each project is supported by a supportive services coordinator, a regional property manager, a regional maintenance specialist, a compliance specialist because of the income restrictions of the property, and a regional vice president. So there's lots of supports from the property, not just in addition to the full-time staff. And then one of the benefits of the tax credit program is the ability to provide a wide array of supportive services for the individuals. So we'll have a community room, as I mentioned, on the first floor, where we'll be able to provide sort of a comprehensive supportive services program for the residents. For seniors, the goal is really to focus on overall health and wellness programs, access to medical services, nutrition and dental services, and really linking them with programs that are already in the city and county for their benefit. And then as far as the, speaking to the tenant selection portion, as a tax credit project with public housing units, the public housing units will be generated by the public housing wait list. So the Housing Authority has a wait list that residents of the city have been placed on for various properties. When the project comes online, those residents' names will be referred to the property and go through the same application process that other residents would, but they'll be generated from the Housing Authority.
I think that covers everything. Any board members have any questions for Mr. Freckles?
Any board member has questions?
This This time I will call Mr. Gregory from last speaker testimony.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
Sure, my name is Gregory Dombalewski, last name spelled D-O-M-A-L-E-W-S-K-I.
And you swear to the truth in this matter?
I do.
I don't remember, so.
My memory kind of failed me a little bit. I have an engineer of record for the George, the Arts Building at George and New Street. I've done a lot of development here. I'm a licensed professional in the state of New Jersey. I was also the engineer of record on the drawings for the demolition of the original Hopper Pavilion. Received my education at Stevens Institute of Technology, a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've also been before numerous boards, Asbury Park, Jersey City, Edison, White Township, we can go on and on if you want.
We'll accept you as a.
All right, thank you.
If you could then, Mr. Dombalewski, if you could go through an overview of the site engineering aspects for site planning, and feel free to use your exhibits and we'll mark them as we go through it. And again, I'm not going to ask you specific questions, but
Sure.
all the engineering issues that are associated with the site.
Sure. So the first exhibit I have here is
A1.
A1. Thank you. The first exhibit is entitled Hoffman Pavilion Vicinity Rendering, Block 106.102, Block 1.03, City of Brunswick, Middlesex County, New Jersey. So, just in general, as you've heard before, the project's located where it has frontage on Hillground Way, has frontage on Nielsen Street to the west, and it has frontage on John Street to the east. Just to give it a general bearing, I mean, it's located in the vicinity of Route 18. You have the Raritan River to the east, and then you have, two parking garages, one to the north, one to the west of the site, and that's Rockoff Hall and the Matrix parking garage. You also have the Bravo Food Market. It's about, I'd say, 200 feet away from the site, very walkable. The existing development has been torn down, as they talked about. It did have 60 units. There was no parking there on site. There was a service bay that entered off John Street. The Mount Zion the Mount Zion African Methodist Episcopal Church. Did I get that right? Yes. So that's to the north, across Hillground Way. And then you also have the Abundant Life Church off to the west with their gravel parking lot directly to the west across from Nielsen Street. And as I said, it's on block 106.02, and it's part of block 1.03 with the entire lot being under the control of the Housing Authority. And this is a portion of the lot that's going to be leased from them as part of this arrangement. The zoning district is in the R6 zoning district, and one of those, the permitted use there is low-rise apartments. We have previously been approved for mid-rise apartments under the last application, and we're also proposing the same thing, mid-rise apartments with the 66 units, affordable housing, and, like I said, for the previous, was 72 units proposed. Mark, is it A2?
Yes.
It's it's entitled Hoffman Pavilion Overall Site Rendering. You guys see how you turn it over there? Yes. Okay. So the general, just the general overview from as if you were flying the site in a drone or in an airplane. You're going to see the roof of the building with an entrance off of John Street and an entrance onto Nielsen Street. So the building's been modified from our original approval to avoid the Lyle culvert a little bit, to work with the engineering department to give them some room there. Like Mr. Freiberg and Mr. Kelso said, to remove one story of the building to reduce the density of the project. So So the proposed construction, they talked about the in breakdown already, it does have the 61 one-bedroom units, the 5 two-bedroom units in the building, one of which is for the superintendent's unit. The vehicular access will be a one-way circulation, entering the underground garage on John Street and exiting onto Nielsen Street, where Nielsen Street is a one-way, so you have to travel south on that roadway. There's going to be a slight modification to the lease area. So currently, there's a bunch of jogs in the lease area. It wasn't really thought of, or, to have a straight property line there for the lease area. So we will modify that, and we'll certainly get those documents to the review with the city engineer and work through all those, the lease area exhibits, giving a proper meets and bounds, descriptions, all that. So again, that's the view from the 1,000-foot level, if you will. Mark this A3, third exhibit. It's entitled Housing Pavilion. That's the parking level site rendering. And so again, this is going to be a single building. There's going to be the access to the garage from John Street, exiting on Nielsen Street. There's going to be a terrace centrally located for if people to go outside and enjoy some outside air, as well as have a little entry corridor into the building, at the center of the building. There will be pedestrian access from all streets, with the primary residential entry off of Nielsen Street. Primary pedestrian entry off of Nielsen Street. There's going to be concrete vertical curbs throughout the site. We also have 5-foot wide concrete walkways along all frontages, Nielsen Street, Oak Brent Way, and John Street, for the engineer to get all the New Brunswick standards implemented on those streets. Inside the garage, there are 14 parking stalls. We have 2 ADA stalls with 16 access stalls for everybody else that aren't going to be designated for ADA. The ADA stalls are 8 feet by 18 feet, and the other stalls are 8.5 feet by 18 feet. So it will need design or variance from the board here. One of the important things to note is that with the design of the project, they will not remove any on-street parking spaces with the project. There are no spaces on our side of Nielsen Street. On the east side of Nielsen Street, there is a bike lane, which also will be not interrupted by our project. It will continue across the front of our parking garage. And then also on John Street, there's currently no parking there now. There won't be at the end of the project. The stalls along Hill Grant Way will remain untouched. After construction is complete, they'll still remain. The site will have ADA compliance throughout for pedestrian entries as well as entry from the garage. And as Mr. Kelso and Mr. Freiberg talked to, there are some variances required in the project. One is the use variance I talked about with the minimum lot width. So because of the configuration of this lot, the subdividing or the leasing of the lot areas from the housing authority creates a unique geometry to the site here.
Excuse me, let me just interrupt you so we make sure we're clear on that. The actual calculation is based upon the lease lines, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So previously approved, as I understand it, was a minimum lot width of 20,400, lot size of 20,475?
Correct.
And now we're seeking a lot, undersized lot of 20,167 square feet.
That's correct.
So that is one variance that's being requested this evening. That is a greater variance than the one that was previously approved.
Correct.
Okay. This will become relevant, so I'm going to
Yep.
ask you each one of these as we go along.
That's fair. So if you want, Mr. President, I'm going to run down the list. So I'll just go through them. If you have any questions, certainly ask them. With that unique geometry as the size of the lot area, the minimum lot width, previously approved, we had 116 feet, which is a variance where 200 feet is required. We are currently proposing 137 feet in lot width.
So we are reducing the variance.
Correct.
being requested. Okay.
Yep. We have the minimum lot depth, where 200 feet is required. We had previously approved 106 feet. With this new application, we're proposing 127 feet, which again,
We're
reduces
reducing
it.
the
Yep.
size of variance.
Correct. The minimum front yard setback requires 50 feet of setback. We previously approved 2.62 feet. On the Nielsen Street frontage, we're proposing 1.3 feet. On Hillbrand Way, we're proposing 1.1 feet. That's a variance.
Those are slightly greater variances.
They're slightly greater due to the geometry of the building changes that are required that the architect will talk about. We do have a maximum building height where we're required to have a maximum building height of 35 feet. We had previously approved 71 feet in building height. We again have the same variance, it's 71 feet in building height. So there's no change to that one. Maximum building coverage, you're allowed 20, or maximum required is 25%. We had previously approved 56%, and we're gonna have a 63% maximum building coverage.
And so that's a slightly greater variance.
Slightly greater variance, and that's again because of the geometry required for the building to fit the units and layouts that the architect will talk about, those changes. The maximum impervious coverage, the maximum required is 60%. We had previously approved 65%, and we're proposing 83%. And again, that's
It's a greater variance.
it's a greater variance. And again, that's because of the, taking the ones throughout the building, changing the layout of the building. You have some inefficiencies, and the architect will also talk about that. Maximum floor area ratio, you require 0.3 to 1. We had previously approved 3.93 to 1, and we are now proposing 3.7 to 1.
So that's a reduction in the density, the density of the variance.
Correct, so a reduction. RSIS parking requirements for the total of the site, based on our unit numbers, it requires 110 spaces for the one-bedroom and 10 spaces for the two-bedroom apartments, for a total of 120 spaces required. We are proposing 14 parking spaces for our project.
And that is precisely the same as the variance that was received previously.
It's the same number of total parking spaces again, with the reduced unit count, we still held the same number of parking stalls. Also in the required variances is site signage. The architect will present the details of the signage. We're required to have one sign per facade permitted and 18 square feet maximum. And that's for apartment complexes with more than 10 residential units. We currently have one sign proposed that's 130 square feet on the Nielsen Ave facade, and that's going to be the building name, and again, the architect will detail that. We may add a directional signage or something like that to the entry of the building, to alert residents to get how to get in there, but it'll comply with the requirements of the maximum of one per facade and 18 square feet maximum for any other signage on the building. The trash for the building, the trash is going to be collected internally, and it's going to be stored inside until collection day. The trash will be separate from the recycling. Utilities will all be serviced by public utilities, public sewer, public water. Some of the unique things that come to play on the site is the grading. The western side of the site is about elevation 20 to 21. The eastern side is down to elevation 12 to 11. There is a portion of the building within the flood hazard area, within the flood area. So we will need a flood hazard permit, and the building will comply with the DEP's requirements in order to obtain that permit. As far as stormwater goes, we're not a major development. We have a total disturbance of 0.57 acres, and an increase in impervious of 0.17 acres. And the flows from the 210 to 100-year storm will match the pre-development flows, and that connects to the sewer within John Street. That ultimately flows to the drainage culvert. And as far as landscaping goes, we're going to have 12 trees, as you see them on the rendering throughout the site. There's going to be 113 shrubs, planted around the site. It's going to be a very well landscaped building for that'll be very appeasing and appealing to the surrounding. Lighting, there's existing lights on Nielsen and Hildebran are going to remain. We're going to put 4 following lights along John Street to light the walkway. There's going to be undermount building lights in the garage area. Basically, it's going to all combined. It's going to be a well-lit building that's safe for the residents.
If I could just ask you to go back, and because I know we've spoken about it, Could you show the location of the culvert? What actually is taking place with respect to that, and what accommodations that we've made with respect to access to that for the city, and how that's being accomplished through an easement?
Sure. So the culvert starts from the west along Wilson Street. It cuts across this existing residential development. It turns under this dumpster enclosure that's currently there in the other development, and sort of comes in a northeast path between the existing garage and our proposed building. And then it turns roughly to the east into John Street. So what we've done is actually pulled the building back in that corner and to allow more space. And we're working with the city engineer to provide the easement, to allow access to the city to be able to get in there and maintain it. And we've kept the area relatively free of all improvements. That way, if they ever do have to go in there and maintain this, the culvert, or get in there in an emergency, they certainly can.
So we provide the ability to access the culvert, and we're not building any structure on top of the culvert from our building, I should say. Our building is.
Correct. There's no building on top of the culvert. It'll be, clear from all building.
And we are providing a permanent easement that we will record for them to be able to have that permanent access.
Correct. We will. And we'll work the details of that easement out with the city engineer and the city.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Valensky.
Any board member have any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned you were, garbage would be kept inside.
Yes.
Who's doing the job on that?
I'd have to defer that one back to the developer on that one. Do you know?
I have no answer.
Yeah, what was the question?
Who will be in charge of, collecting garbage? Is it going to be the city, or do you have a private contractor?
I think that we would work with the city on that. I'm not sure the city, do you know?
I don't think it's been
Well, I
finalized.
can answer that one.
Yeah.
You don't pick up from dumpsters and so
Yeah.
forth, so you're gonna have private pickup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the other projects, they have a private pickup, so the expectation.
So it'll be wheeled out on trash day and be picked up by a private hauler and see what happens.
On your parking stall size, you require 9 foot 18, and now you're proposing 8.5 foot. Why are you reducing that?
That has to do with the structure, and the architect can certainly go into more detail about column spacing, but typically when you have parking stall spaces underneath structure, you're limited to the column spacing, and that's the reason why.
They're going to be underneath the structure then.
They're gonna be underneath the structure. And you can see here on the rendering, these squares are the structured columns where they're coming down and hitting, which gives you a certain distance between the columns.
And your handicap spaces will be not on.
The handicap space will be in compliance with regulations.
And just for edification, that's considered a design waiver, not a variance, but typically in all of the New Brunswick Parking Authority garages, we're routinely 8.5 by 18.
So, particularly for a building like this, it doesn't have a lot of in and out, 8.5 foot spaces, but pretty typical of what they've been designing.
Anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, the next witness, please.
At this time, I will call Stephen Schott for testimony.
Raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please.
Stephen Schott, S-C-H-O-C-H.
And you swear to this matter?
I do.
Mr. Scott, have your credentials changed since the last time you came before this board?
No, they're all still in good standing.
Then we'll accept you effectively.
If you could then, why don't you just give us an overview of the building, feel free to use the renderings, and just essentially go through all the detail of the building.
This is A4. And now that you would kind of hold this for those folks so they can actually see what the looks like. I'm sorry, we don't have another reason. Thanks. Okay, I'll try not to be redundant with some of the things that have already been put in testimony about the magnitudes and things like that and the unit mix. But basically, it's a 6-story residential apartment building, and You can see that from the exterior facade drawing, what we're doing is we're varying a lot of the materials, some of the colors, trying to take a building of this magnitude and break it down visually to a smaller size. These are all the things that appear that are specific to this site. One of the key elements, and it's actually a change from the building that was approved in 2010, is handling of the very corner of Nielsen and Hildebrand. Let me refer to one of the site plans for a moment. I'll refer to exhibit 82 in this. The 2.6 foot setback that was approved in 2010 is actually right here at the corner. The building came straight to a hard point at the corner and created that pinch point there. One of the things that we've done with the geometry in laying the building out for this approval is, now that we know much more about where the culvert is, the building itself shifted away from that culvert. This massive building shifted away from the culvert. That creates some of the geometrical complexity. But as a result, one of the things we did is we cocked that corner unit on an angle. And what that does is it creates two pinch points as opposed to one on the front corner. But the reality is it makes for a much clearer sight line and visual going around. Also, I think that, again, referring back to the perspective rendering, I think that gives the building a much stronger presence, the way it addresses the corner as kind of a gateway element in coming into this community. In terms of the way the building functions, there's a covered entrance and secure vestibule right off of Nielsen. From the back side of that, there is a center outdoor courtyard, so there is a secondary entrance to the lobby from that, and there's also a lobby entrance from the covered parking area underneath. All of those are controlled with resident key cards and things like that. The front lobby has the ability for management to let folks in that are visitors. As I said before, the current design is less intense than the previous one, though at 6 stories, it's about the same height. And one of the reasons for that, again, this is drawing a difference between the current design and the prior, is the prior design at 7 stories was pushed down, somewhat buried, and you couldn't actually drive through, come in one way and come out onto Nielsen. It was basically a dead-end garage in and out of John Street. What this does is, even though it's 6 stories, it raises up slightly so that you can actually flow through, and then that improves the circulation both inside the building and I think in the neighborhood as well. The amenities in this building on the ground floor, you've got the one superintendent's unit, as Mr. Freiberg testified to. There's also management office, and there's community space immediately adjacent to the outdoor courtyard. On the upper floors, it's a typical double-loaded corridor type of building served by 2 elevators. There is a laundry on each floor, and there's a trash room on each floor where residents go take their trash. It goes into a chute compactor at grade, and that is all serviced, as has been said, without using outside storage. There is an emergency generator for the building that is not set out in the yard, as it will. There's actually a portion of the building that is over top of some of the floodplain, and what we can do inside that area is we can lift up a platform for the generator to sit on, so it's also enclosed by and screened by the architecture of the building. All the units themselves are fully designed for adaptability and accessibility. All senior units, they comply with the ADA and with the New Jersey Barrier Free. The unit sizes and amenities, they're all in compliance with the criteria set forth by the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency in order for the building to be competitive for the funding that it seeks. Also, along with that is very high quality construction standards. While it doesn't seek formal LEED type of designation, it will be formally Energy Star, and many of those green sustainable strategies will be going into this building. I've testified here before that for affordable housing projects, that even though the rents to live there are affordable, the construction is some of the highest quality residential construction that you're going to find anywhere in the country. Materials, we've got a mix of stone, brick, and you've got these cementitious type of panels on the upper floors. Again, high quality, durable materials that are appropriate here. And it's kind of a transitional palette of materials between some of the residential architecture and some of the higher rise buildings. So it really does have that kind of transitional feel to it. The sign, the last thing is the sign. You can see it in the rendering. It currently says 75 Nielsen. That's because the owner and the applicant has not yet formally developed a emblem name for it. But with a building like this, where you've got somewhat large swaths of facade, in this particular area, we felt that was a very appropriate place for a monumental sign. And for the other sides, we would live within the allowable criteria of 18 square feet. So what you're seeing represented here is an area of approximately 130 square feet for that sign. And that is not illuminated signage. It's just building mounted.
I have no further questions for Mr. Schott.
Any member of the board have any questions? Seeing none?
We have one witness, however, I'm going to ask if we could take a recess for us, but I want to have a brief conversation with counsel for the board before we actually present our last witness and the effects of testimony. And it's 8:30 anyway, so we could be 10 minutes.
Sure. Just say
This time I will call Mr. Keeney Hughes for testimony.
Can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please?
Keenan Hughes, Hughes.
And you start with the truth in this matter?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Mr. Hughes, since the last time you've been here, have your credentials changed at all?
No, that.
Cool. That's good.
Thank you.
Mr. Hughes, again, you are a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, correct?
Yes,
In that capacity, you've had an opportunity to look at the variances, to do an analysis of the variances and the requesting the board this evening.
I have.
Just to restate the principles by which we started this hearing, to the extent that we've already made a determination that the D variances, which are the height variance, the use variance, the FAR variance, are still valid existing variances, correct?
I agree.
You understood that, right? And also with regard to the parking variance that was previously approved in 2010 is still a valid variance.
Correct.
And you heard the testimony from Mr. Donalewski with regard to the specific bulk variances that either have remained the same, so therefore they're already validly approved, or there are certain variances that have changed, which are greater variances, which would require the board to actually approve a new variance. You were here listening to all that testimony.
I'm in agreement with that.
So what I'd like you to do is to take a few moments and just, again, for the record, acknowledge the existence of those variances. And then I'd like you to touch upon the change in those variances, even though they were reduced, particularly the FAR for the D. But then also to then talk to the bulk variances that we identified for Mr. Donalewski have actually changed and are now increased. And if you can, hopefully you can provide a justification for the variance.
Sure. Thank you. Right, so as Mr. Kelso stated at the outset, we're seeking some very minor modifications to the project here, which really relate more to the design of the site than anything else. The use itself remains inherently beneficial. It has not changed. I would just emphasize that what's being proposed here, though, is a smaller and less intensive development than what was prior approved. The FAR, again, has been reduced from 3.93 to 3.7. The number of units have also been reduced from 72 to 66, but the parking spaces have actually changed the same. So the parking ratio has in fact increased. So those three variances relate, the D variances for use, height, and FAR remain in full effect. To the extent there are any changes that have been reduced. No new testimony in support of those variances are necessary at this time. The same may be said of the parking variance. As I just indicated, the ratio has actually been increased. This is a previously approved variance, so the conditions have changed favorably as part of this revised application. From an aesthetic viewpoint, the revised project is a superior design. Certainly, there's more breaking down of the massing of the building, as Mr. Schock described the project, and I would emphasize that the new corner element has the added benefit of actually providing more site visibility at that corner of Nielsen Street and Hildebrand. But in general, this is really about respecting the culvert which exists on the site, which triggered some of these modifications, and also providing better circulation both within and outside of the building. So with respect to those bulk variances that Mr. Kelso cited that are changing in this, the minimal change in the front yard setback variance, and I will refer to your exhibit A3, and just to emphasize that the previously approved front yard setback variance was for 2.6 feet, and here with the redesign of the building, it's creating these two pinch points at the corner of Nielsen Street and Hildebrand Way, which are at I believe 1.6 feet and 1.3 feet respectively, or is it 1.3 and 1.1? But the key point is that the actual front yard setback varies throughout the property. And what you can see is that despite the fact the building is shifted closer to Nielsen Street and also to Hildebrand Way, there's still a lot of opportunities here for some nice landscaping between the proposed building and the right-of-way, which will provide a very attractive appearance. And as I mentioned earlier, this new corner element at the corner of Hildebrand Way and Nielsen Street is actually a positive change in that it provides more site visibility than the prior approval where the corner of the building was pulled a little bit closer to that corner and closer to the right-of-way. So, and I would just add that that adjustment, of course, is also critical to providing adequate protection to the culvert. Likewise, the building and impervious coverage, this is really triggered by, along with the minimum lot area, the changes with respect to the lease line here, which triggered some higher coverage on the site. No substantial detrimental impacts are created from these minimal modifications, and again, I think the overall conclusion is that it results in a better designed site. The proposed sign, which was described by Mr. Schock, which again I'll show on A4, is 130 square feet in area, whereas 18 square feet is permitted in the R6 district. The intent of the sign, I think, is as much aesthetic as it is functional, and it really becomes part of the architecture of the building. As you see here, I mean, this is an element which otherwise may not have windows. It's an appropriate location for a decorative element. It is vertical and not overly visually imposing. It is not illuminated, which is important from an impact standpoint. This sign will not create any substantial detrimental impacts to the surrounding area for that reason. And I would argue that it advances purpose I of the municipal land use law as much as it enhances the appearance of the building. And this is really about identification. It's not about a large logo or branding for a private entity. It's really about providing an identifier for this particular building. The parking, again, is actually being improved upon, so I won't spend any time dwelling on that issue. But I think taken as a whole, if you look at these bulk variances and the fairly modest changes to the prior approval, they can be, or all of them taken as a whole, advance purposes A, E, I, and L of the municipal land use law. This is really an appropriate location for affordable senior housing, where services and amenities, including a supermarket, are within walking distance or accessible via bus service, and where a similar use was previously existed. So the no substantial detrimental impacts to the public good or substantial impairment to the zone plan. In fact, the master plan talks a lot about diversifying housing within the city and providing housing for all communities within the city, including seniors in need of affordable housing. So the variances may be justified in accordance with the C2 justification because the positive aspects of the proposal, and I think that's indicative of the various purposes of municipal land use law which are being advanced, clearly outweigh any potential detriments. So the 3D variances are previously approved. The changes to those are simply decreasing the intensity of those with respect to the FAR, actually lowering the amount of units that have been approved. So those are previously approved variances. Likewise, the parking, improving that situation. And the bulk variances that are being requested, all of them can be justified on the C2 justification in that the positive and negative criteria are both satisfied. So with that, that concludes my testimony.
No further questions for any board member have any questions? I guess I'm going to ask all board members, is everyone clear as to what the bulk variance is that we're going to be voting on a little bit later, considering that some have already been previously approved?
Yeah, I'd like, there's a way somebody can actually say, this is the exact item.
Well, we think it's going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, front yard setback,
Correct.
previous coverage, and a sign?
Well, it's
There's building coverage, impervious coverage, which should basically be here by the same thing. The front yard setbacks, the pinch points that you referred to, and the actual size of the lot area, which has been decreased slightly because of the movement of the lease line. Again, it's actually not lot lines, it's the shifting of the housing authority's lease lines. So it's kind of an imaginary setback, but, and lot size, but technically that's the way it's been interpreted. It's changed by a couple hundred feet.
Anyone have any questions concerning that? Any questions for the director?
That completes our presentation.
Questions, comments at this time? Before we open the public and members, before that, anything? At this point in time, I'd like to open up the public portion of the meeting. Anyone from the public have any questions or concerns, please come forward.
Sir, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Reverend Eric Phillips, Senior, pastor of the Mount Zion Church.
Can you spell your last name, please?
Easy Ball, ILLIDS.
And you affirm to tell the truth?
I promise. The Mount Zion Aiden Church is the oldest African American church, not just in Brunswick, but in Middlesex County. This year we'll be celebrating 188 years of Christian service to the city and the surrounding area. Approximately 30 years ago, under the leadership of the Reverend Dr. Henry Hildebrand, the Mount Zion congregation with great determination was sacrificed, erected its present edifice. Monumental accomplishments situated Mount Zion in an area where the congregation could exercise the ministry and service that our founders intended, and that which is consistent with the doctrine and discipline of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In building the new facility, for one reason or another, the congregation was not required to include adequate parking for the 1,200-seat auditorium. As a result, for the last 3 decades, our congregation has been forced to rely upon minimal street parking and the kindness of others who own property surrounding the church. These parking limitations have minimized opportunities for growth and programming. Unfortunately, the aforementioned opportunities for parking have been greatly diminished. The property diagonally opposite of Mount Zion at the corner of Morris Street and Nielsen Street was purchased from the city by another church. Last year, the owner of the property diagonally across the opposite of Mount Zion on the corner of New and Nielsen Street began construction of a multi-level residential facility. Finally, last year, the county established bicycle lanes on both sides of Nielsen Street, which has been the last option for parking in the immediate vicinity of the Mount Zion Church. Realizing our shrinking parking opportunities, we inquired concerning the vacant lot opposite of Mount Zion on the corner of Nielsen and Hildebrand Way, which is the property of the proposed project. We were told that the Housing Authority had planned to rebuild a senior housing facility on that property, but was considering another site. The downtown parking decks were suggested as a possible options. However, the number of senior adults who make up our congregation require a much closer solution. While we realize the need for decent and affordable housing for seniors and other residents of the city, we also feel that we must provide support for the houses of worship and other institutions that add to the quality of life in the New Brunswick area. The parking challenges with which we contend threaten the sustainability of our congregation at our present location. We, the pastors, officers, and members of Mount Zion, look forward to serving Mount Zion in New Brunswick in many years to come at our present locale, and are asking that you assist us in doing so. Consequently, we cannot in good conscience support the variances requested in the proposed construction project, as the project would exacerbate the current parking challenges. Further, we request that the city would identify an alternative location for the proposed project. Thank you.
Excuse me, could I just ask the Reverend a question? I believe you referenced it in the beginning, and I recall this, I've been around here a long time. But when the church was approved, I believe you actually requested and received a parking variance.
I was not here. That was 30 years ago. But again, that speaks to the fact that when we make such variances later down the road, we sometimes regret them.
But now you understand that the board has the opinion issued that the variance has already been approved. We're not here.
I understand that, but that's just, we want to realize that making those variances does cause problems in future years. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in, because a variance was allowed, and now our congregants have no place to park as a result.
I just wanted
Yeah, absolutely. Now, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No
I'm
problem.
sorry.
No problem.
With, my question does concern, of course, our concern is parking. Do we really think that 14 lots, parking spaces, will be sufficient for a 65-unit building? Are we assuming that older residents don't drive?
Well, let me-
or how is that?
Let me try to answer the question. First of all, the previous Hoffman Pavilion, which was there
Right.
when your church was built,
Right.
it was there functioning, it was occupied,
Absolutely.
had no parking.
Absolutely.
There was no parking at all for those residents.
Right.
The standard that was used by the city for senior housing prior to the institution of RSIS, which is a state standard which has been imposed throughout the state, is always and is based upon experience, is that senior projects like this would require 1 space per 10 units. So under that standard, 7 spaces would have been a requirement for this building, and we're proposing 14. So in either case, what you've got is you've got a situation where we're actually exceeding what the city's standard had been with regard to senior housing, and we're actually providing parking where there was none there previously. And I think a lot of that is based upon what is the actual demand, because many of the residents that will live there will not have vehicles. And there may be some visitors that come and go, that's true, but part of what my client's responsibility is, they will provide transportation for essential services, which my client testified to previously. We know from their experience with the other projects that they actually manage in New Brunswick, that the dial-a-ride service, for example, that the county provides senior services, Meals on Wheels, plus the Bravo for those essential services within a block long. So our position is that that's a very good location. But more than that, that the parking demand, you probably will find it just isn't there for that type of housing.
Just as I had talked about in my testimony earlier, a large majority of these units are going to be housing authority units for the very low income, and owning a car is a financial burden that a lot of individuals in the very low income.
That's a good statement. Stop that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just have to let the speaker who had before speak. We can't just let it, which is you just can't have interruptions. Please, thank you.
Yeah, so certainly not in all cases, but generally at the properties we manage, that have the very low income units. Those individuals and families do not have, do not own cars, and so the utilization for the parking is typically very low. So given that the large majority of these units are very low income, it's likely, but not certain, that most of the individuals will not own cars.
And again, I want to emphasize, we're not here to discuss the parking variance, they're already been granted, so we don't get lost in the sauce here. But just to give you some sense of what the experience is with regard to that type of housing, and also the experience from what was previously there. And we would have met the city standard in any case, because those standards are based on what the actual experience is.
One more question. When is proposed construction to begin, and then what impact will that have to those in the surrounding area?
Well, first of all, they have to get funded. So usually what would happen with a tax credit round, my guess is they would know whether they would be funded sometime in the fall. And if they were to be funded, then there's a period of 90 to 120 days in order to be able to put financing together. So the likelihood is, if they are successful, this probably wouldn't start until the spring of next year. Now, more importantly, I think to your point, is before they just go in and start construction, the city would review a construction logistics plan. Because everybody who lives there, the church will want to know how the streets impacted, how the sidewalks impacted. Is there going to be a crane? Is there going to be, sidewalk protection? All of that is routine for every type of a project that gets approved, and the city engineer's office goes through them, and to the extent that there would be a temporary street closure or something, the city council has to approve it. But it's not just they go in willy-nilly. There's a process that the city reviews, and it's a very rigorous process to make sure pedestrians are protected, traffic safety is observed, traffic is not obstructed, and no one is overly inconvenienced by construction.
Right. So because it's a very tight area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public have any questions, comments? Come forward, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name, please.
Beverly Marshall, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L.
And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes.
Please proceed.
My name is Beverly Marshall. I also live in New Brunswick Apartments, 33 Commercial Avenue, and I'm also the committee woman of the area that you're building this project. All of the apartments are for seniors.
Yes.
Am I correct? And
Just something like, it's 55 and over.
oh, okay, thank
But
you.
they're all low income. They're senior-ish, but it's 55 and over.
That makes a big difference. Is this wheelchair accessible?
Yes, it is fully accessible from the ground floor, and is an elevator building.
And how many elevators?
2.
One on this side and one on the other side? This project looked much bigger, very much bigger than the area that you're talking about. Now, you did say that it was decreased,
Yeah.
but this looks very large for that area. Now, across the street, there's an empty lot where the city was doing a lot of work, I guess, with the pipes and reconstructing the streets. And they were using that lot across the street from the old senior housing.
For staging? Or, I say they were using it everywhere.
It's been about a year. I think they just stopped. That's where they had all the large pipelines and everything, construction. They were doing, that's where they kept all of the work. And now it's empty. So is that going to be part of
Ms.
this,
are you referring to the Abundant Life parking lot, or which lot are you referring to?
No, there's one right across the street. The Abundant Life is diagonal.
Okay.
There's an empty lot, you know where the senior housing is, the old Lord Sterling Elementary School? And then they have, they have a parking lot there, and then they have a large space.
Yeah, that one, that's the lot that's owned by the community builders that used to be a playground back in the school. So.
Okay, now, when you say that, now I live there and I don't have a car. I can drive, but I don't have a car. But I know a lot of seniors that have cars. And when you're talking 55 and up, and then you also said about the tax credit, and I will assume that all apartments would be Section 8? Or part of it?
All the units will be affordable. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're subsidized with project-based vouchers. There are a certain number of units that have project-based vouchers and assistance from the housing authority, but not all of them.
Okay.
But the majority.
When you say the majority, and when you say affordable,
Yes.
you also said $45,000, I believe?
That is the tax credit program has an income ceiling, so no resident, nobody's income in the property can exceed 45,000, but that's at the top of the restriction. Because most of these units will be public housing units, those individuals' incomes are likely to be on the lower end of the income range, about 20 to 30% of their median income.
Okay, so when you say 55, that means that if you're 55, you would have to be disabled in order to live there?
No.
Really? That makes it a big difference. Because if it's senior housing and it's subsidized by HUD, and when you say 55, and most buildings, you have to be 55 and disabled. So if you're not disabled and you have 61 one-bedroom apartments, so that means that anyone 55, 56 can move in.
Well, a large, again, about 48, I believe, units are housing authority controlled, where the residents are referred through their wait list. The additional 14, I think it is, those units are just considered tax credit affordable units, by which individuals would apply to the property, and it would be on a first come, first served basis based on their, provided they meet the income qualifications to live there. So, if the individuals are 5 or older, a small percentage of units are available to those residents. The other will come from the housing authority.
So it's going to be mixed. It's going to be people that are just on the limit to live there, and then you're going to have people that are above the limit that are living there. So it's going to be mixed.
What's the limit? I'm sorry.
Not above the limit, can't be above
You
the
can't
limit.
be above the limit.
Well-
Up to 60% area median.
Well, for Section 8 and one-bedroom apartment, it's not going to be 45,000, if they're going to have a subsidy for a one-bedroom apartment. So you said there were so many apartments.
Could I try to clarify?
Mm-hmm.
And you correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, but I think the income qualifications are going to be very similar to what someone would have for living in the Riverside project right next door to it. That project, which was, you and I discussed a lot when we were building that project down there, has a mix of tax credit units and other units that are subsidized with other housing authority funds. Everyone who lives in Riverside has to be low income. It's just which strata of low income you can be in. Everyone's low income. Some are low income here, some are very low income.
Yes.
And I believe what the applicant has testified here is about 70% of the units are for very low income.
And
I think
the
also
other-
in the TAC meetings that we had, you discussed that I think it's 5 units are for persons who were formerly homeless in here.
Yes, 5 units are set aside for individuals that are homeless. That's one of the state criteria for the tax credits. So we will have that in the project.
So you have 5 units that are set aside for the homeless, and then you have how many units for low income?
Well, it's not that they're set aside for low income, it's that they are housing authority units for individuals that are referred from their wait list. And those individuals are, on average, on the lower end of the income spectrum.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Please come forward, please.
state your name, spell your last name for me, please.
Linda White, B-R-I-C-H.
And you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
I just had a question. I just wanted to know, is this the board that we would talk to about changing the, is it zoning on, for the parking on the streets, like there's 2 bike lanes in that block between Avenue and Morris Street on Nielsen? No? Who do we have to, we gotta go through?
The county put those bike lanes in, that was a $7 million worth of infrastructure, and it's something frankly the city and the county support to make the city more bicycle friendly, to improve the
I
health,
understand.
to improve the health of people in town, to make them more mobile, and so you don't have to rely on a car to get around.
Yeah, but there's 2 lanes in the same block.
Yes.
Like most only have one side.
Well, it's because it's a one-way street and the bikes need to go both ways, so there's a bike lane on either. One goes towards Douglas College and the other goes towards downtown.
Oh.
And so it's, the bike lane's only on that one street, so you have to have 2. The cars have lots of other options as to where they can go and have car protected space. It's one of the few places in town that has some space dedicated towards bicycles.
Okay. Is there any suggestions that you might have for us as far as parking, alternate parking?
Well, I know we've talked about a lot. I think Reverend Phillips referenced it, that there is a public parking deck a block away. I understand for some of your seniors or some people who may have mobility issues, that may not be real convenient. I don't know if there's a way to do parking management and so forth. It might be a conversation we'll be having with the parking authority. I mean, I know some restaurants over there offer like a valet type service or something like that. If something like that might be able to be worked out of reserving some spaces that you have on site or nearby for persons who are mobility challenged. I think very willing to try to work it. There's a lot of competing demands, and I think we're trying to provide some affordable housing here, and so we're trying to do it in a way that minimizes the need to have.
I think it's great. I'm concerned to see it.
Yeah, I don't want to make the apples escape. I mean, one of the reasons that the city looks at a location like this, there's a supermarket a block away. It has things like bike lanes. It's walkable. You can get to a lot of different services without having to get in a car. So we think that makes it a good location for persons who may not have the means to own a car. There's bus lines nearby and so forth. But we try and work on it. The city keeps growing and so forth.
Yes.
And you got to have a problem. This is one of the better problems to have.
Thank you.
Hi, can you read your right hand? State your name, spell your last name.
Monica Townsend, T-O-W-N-S-E-N-D.
And you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes. So I just wondered about, you had mentioned the tax credit process a little bit, and that before you applied, but were not successful. So how are you going to fund the project then?
Well, we hope we're gonna be successful this time.
Right, but you weren't the first time. So something changed. I guess your variances changed the first time.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the site plan. It has to do with the scoring criteria and the preferences that HMFA assigns for values associated with applying.
Is that HUD?
No, it's the state, New
Okay.
Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency.
So the tax credit program, that was HUD program.
The housing authority the housing authority is under the purview of HUD. The land is owned by HUD. This is a project in cooperation with the housing authority, but the tax credit financing program is separate from HUD. It's actually an IRS.
Yeah, I think the difference where you get confused with this is that the state HMFA and the tax credit program is funding that makes available to construct the project.
Right, so any capital projects.
Correct. The HUD, the vouchers, or the public funding that comes to support the tenants paying their rent, which is a whole different process that it's separate and apart from the developer actually having the funding available to build the project.
Okay.
So that's the distinction.
So what happens if you're not successful the second time around?
Be back, eventually.
And so how long does that process happen? Like when, do you continue to say, okay, we'll just keep going, make changes, or is there a stop date
No,
to
I
kind
think the
of?
city has a commitment to
Yeah.
try to rebuild these units, which were there when the Hoffman Pavilion was taken down. Housing authority in the cities wanted to rebuild back on the site. Say the last 7.5, 8 years, the housing policy in the state of New Jersey has been less than friendly for building affordable housing, and they've made some policy changes that say favor developing more affordable housing in more suburban type areas and made it a little tougher in urban areas. They've tweaked those rules a little bit in the last year or so, and I think the developer feels that there's an opportunity here to have a very competitive application for these dollars, so there's an opportunity at this time. Nothing's guaranteed. There's a lot of, I think they're hoping to come in with a perfect score application. There's a number of perfect score applications out there, but if we don't get it this time, I think we want to keep trying to do this. We want to provide housing for this segment of the population if there's a need for it.
So I would just say consider if, you know, how long this process would drag out in terms of trying to get funding for something like this. If it's not this location or a different location, you know, again, going with all the assessment pieces that you all have taken into consideration. Because if it's gonna drag out for 7 more years, then, you know, what are we really doing?
Well, I can't disagree with that.
Right.
There's always, as Glenn has indicated, there's a commitment on the city to replace that housing that was lost, and that's gonna have to be in the city, and this is the location where HUD owns the land. So we're gonna keep trying, and we think this time, because of what changes were made in the scoring criteria, I think we've got a very good chance.
Thank you.
Leslie Williams. I have a question. I've listened a lot about the construction and all that, and I've heard you guys constantly say that there is the waiting list and how the building is going to be occupied is going to be based on the housing authority or what have you. But my concern is, since I'm here as a member of the church, is there any way that we can be included to have it so that the people that we serve are often people that are looking for a place to live, including the homeless? And is there any way, since we serve the community, we have been an establishment of this community for almost 200 years, that as this lovely community here, as it's about to be built, that we can also have a way that we can say that we can refer, is there a connection, is there a contact, is there a way that we can be included with the people that are eligible to live in this space?
Yeah. So the units that belong to the housing authority, as I mentioned, would have to go through their wait list.
Mm-hmm.
The other units that are affordable but not housing authority units are available to the public that meet the affordability criteria, the income restrictions. And because this is a federal program,
Mm-hmm.
there are general public use rules, meaning that you can't just restrict units in the building to one particular group or population, that we have to open it up to everybody and make it, you know, a transparent, available process. But certainly we can, you know, work with the local
so that we
community
can have a seat at the
to
table.
let you know, about the construction process. Obviously, you know, being the church across the street, you'll be able to see
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
About, you know, when we're setting up our management, lease up timing, and when our wait list is going to open, and make sure that you're, you know,
I would love to.
members of your community are fully aware
Yes.
when that is, where that is, what
Yes.
they need to do, so that they can get on that list. But because it is a federal program, you have to make it, market it widely in the public newspaper, let everybody know when it's going to be available, and then it's just first come, first served.
Thank you.
I'm staying with my husband, the man I'm staying.
Raise your right hand, state your names for the license, please.
Myra, Phillips, B-I-L-L.
Swear to do this matter?
I just wanted to ask this question. What is the law, so if your project does fail, or if it does not go through, and will the property just remain vacant until, a federal project or whatever has been approved? And is there, any law that states that, while we're waiting, that Mount Zion could possibly use this lot for parking?
I don't want to speak for the housing authority because I don't represent them, nor do I understand all the nuances of the rules, but it is highly unlikely that they can take federally owned funded land that's in the public domain and enter into an agreement for a private entity to be able to utilize the property for parking. I highly doubt that that's possible, but I can't say for certain. And I'm sure that the housing authority is going to continue to find a way ultimately to develop the affordable housing there because of what was replaced. But I don't think that they have the legal ability to be able to enter into an agreement to allow that. But you'd have to ask them. I mean, I don't want to speak for them.
We have no, we're not part of the housing authority, so we don't have those answers. I would have to go directly to the housing
If you
authority.
want to contact John Clark of the Housing Authority, go to one of their public meetings,
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, can you raise your right hand, state your name, spell your last name for me, please?
Judy Dixon, D-I-X-O-N-Word.
And you swear to tell the truth in this matter? You swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, I have two questions. Because there was discussion earlier about parking. Will the housing authority or the management of this building help the residents who are going to occupy the building with parking if there are only 14 parking spaces and you have 65 units?
I'm not sure what you mean by helping them.
Or directing them to other parking facilities, or?
No,
So they'll just park.
they'll manage this parking facility, and they will, ultimately, they probably will be on a first come, first served basis for anybody who's living in that building, but it's not available to anyone outside of that building.
The other question I was trying to understand is, you said affordable housing and low-income housing. Is this part of the requirement for the city of New Brunswick to provide that level of housing?
It's multi-level. Yes, it is the city's program through the housing authority, to create affordable housing at this location. But it also is a requirement of the financing that's been applied for. So it's a multi.
If I think out of Mr. Morton's question, this is not Mount Laurel housing. We're not required to build it for
Correct.
Mount Laurel's fair share of housing, but I mean, the city does have a policy where it thinks building housing like this is a good thing. So we want to have housing like this, but yeah, it's not required Mount Laurel housing like you might find in East Brunswick or something like that.
Now, an easy question, just for me, because I'm looking at the size visual. What are the sizes of the units?
I'll just shout it out, how's that?
Good.
Can you hear me? So the typical one-bedroom unit size is approximately 650 square feet. That's for the 61 one-bedroom units. There are some slight deviations in the plan if it's a little bit further out or not to create some of the bay windows and things.
Okay.
The two-bedroom units are approximately 870 square feet. And those are areas that are set forth in the funding criteria guidelines as well to make sure that the units are big enough to be marketable and service the families intended.
You said 600 for the one.
650 for the ones, 870
Oh,
for the
870 for the two.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other members of the public have any questions, comments?
Could I refer to state your names for our last meeting, please?
Charles Craddock, K-R-A-T-O-B-I-L.
Do this better?
Yes, I do, sir. Good evening, members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. Also want to just say kudos to everybody else who spoke. There were some great points, great questions, and even though it means we get home a little later, I think that the meetings are better when more people come and speak up and ask questions. So I was glad to see that. I have some questions. I won't belabor them.
Mark, hold on a second. Just stop. You can pull it out. Just
Good thing I brought my camera. Okay. Thank you. Just want to say that it's an honor and pleasure to speak to you, and I think it's good that a lot of people spoke up and had questions. I have a few of my own. I'll try to be as quick as possible. First of all, is this a redevelopment area?
Yes, it's a redevelopment area. No, this is not a redevelopment project.
Okay, is that unusual?
Don't know what you mean by that. Really.
I've just never heard of that before. Usually a redevelopment area is a redevelopment project. What's,
I mean,
It's not
the
a,
whole downtown is a redevelopment area, but most projects in downtown aren't redevelopment projects. I mean, it happens to be designated that area is a redevelopment area. This isn't a redevelopment project.
thank you. Just trying to learn about this. Can you tell me why there were changes to the lease with the NBHA? The lease lines moved and that affected the project in some way. What was the motivation for those changes and when did those happen?
primary reason is to adjust to take care of the building footprint to avoid the culvert.
So it's inspired by the problem with the culvert. Okay.
Inspired is an interesting word, but yes,
Motivated. Okay. Is this project? I mean, I had some conversation earlier with the project director, and I was told this project's not part of the Hope 6 project, but I do see in the documents that you guys should have, in some of the, in particular, the documents dealing with the lease. It refers to Hope 6 Tower, Hope 6 Towers. Can you tell me, once and for all, is this part of the Hope 6 program, the federal Hope 6 program?
No, it's not. Penrose is not the developer for the Hope 6 that was designated by the housing code. That was the community builders. We bumped into each other in the parking lot earlier. I said, I mean, this is related to it down in developing that whole area, but it is not something that's funded by the Hope 6 program.
Okay. And so could somebody explain the reference to it in the lease documents that the developer provided? I believe there's two leases. And
because the lease that exists for community builders is the Hope 6 lease area. This is adjacent to it. The adjustment in the lease line will affect their lease, so therefore Hope 6 is affected by the lease line.
It's a neighboring, it's the reference to the neighboring property. Can you tell me what is the neighboring property? It's part of the Riverside housing?
Yes.
Okay, and it looks like there'll be some space in between the two of them?
You mean space between the buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just check.
The lots on private, or the lease area.
The lease line is adjacent.
Gotcha. But no other buildings are in between. It's the Riverside housing will be right next to 75. Can you tell me what parts of the HMFA's criteria the application didn't get a perfect score on, and how would this application have a better shot?
I don't know why that's relevant to variance application or site plan.
It was testified to by the applicant. I'm just curious.
You're answering questions, basically.
What's that?
Because they were answering questions, but the question's really not relevant to what's before the board.
I think if it was stated during the testimony, then it is relevant. I just want to know how this project is an improvement over the last one.
For the record, not all testimony is relevant, as you pointed out a number of times.
Well, I mean, the criteria changed. I can't tell you what was different,
So the
9 years
criteria
ago. The criteria has changed, so it's different criteria, as I mentioned before, some of the priorities have changed, so now it's a little more favorable for funding a senior urban project. And it also depends on what the competition is. If there's, if HFA has enough money to fund 3 projects of this type and 5 compete for it, you probably have a better chance than if 10 compete for it and all of them have good scores.
Gotcha.
And that's why the goal is always to try to score 100%.
Right on. And is this an annual process, or it varies year to year? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Annual, twice a year?
Sometimes it's once a year. Sometimes if they have more funding available, they'll do a second round in a year. It really depends on how much money they're allocated and when it's allocated.
Okay. I'm pleased to see a representative from the developer here tonight. I'm disappointed to not see a representative from the Housing Authority. The owners of the land, they're obviously intimately going to be involved in the project. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody came to represent the Housing Authority tonight. I think that might want to give the board some pause and a chance to get them involved at this level.
Can I just clarify for the board? That's not a site plan issue. They discuss that at their Housing Authority meetings. What Mr. Patrick is referring to are how they're leasing and so forth. The board's just dealing with the site plan, the physical aspects of it, whether it's, you know, how many units are affordable and so forth isn't a site plan issue.
And they provided for the record their consent to the application and the adjustment of the lease line in writing by the secretary.
Okay, and just if I can explain to the board just some of the reasons I'm concerned about the Housing Authority. I know obviously, as has been alluded to, there have been a lot of, it's been a difficult landscape to build affordable housing in the area, and I know for a fact that the Housing Authority's budget keeps getting smaller, not bigger, and I'm pleased to see that there's a new project to build affordable housing and to build public housing, but I am concerned about the operation at the New Brunswick Housing Authority, and I've raised concerns about this in the past. For instance, it was mentioned that one of the speakers should attend a meeting of the New Brunswick Housing Authority board, and if that speaker had tried to attend the most recent meeting, they would show up and find that the meeting had been canceled because the board doesn't have enough members showing up sometimes to have their meetings. And so I think that it's a bad sign that nobody came out from the Housing Authority tonight. I think the board should consider that, even though they may have put something in writing saying we sign off on it. It would have been better to have them here to answer questions.
Charlie, can you get to the point of where you're getting off base of what this application is about? We're not the Housing Authority.
Okay.
We're the zoning board. We're listening to the testimony of what is going to be built on here and not what the Housing Authority does. So please get back on point.
I understand. Well, I do want to take the opportunity, if I could ask a question of one of the witnesses about, it is intriguing that the Housing Authority would have public housing in the building. It would be privately managed. I wanted to ask, it seems that there's been experience doing this in the past. Are there any projects in New Brunswick that this developer has done that in the past? Can I just hear from the developer?
Yes. So there are a couple projects located on Harvey Street, Providence Square, and Providence Square 2, also goes by 55 Harvey, is another similar type of scope, not exactly the building, but is a housing authority owned land for which members has redeveloped housing authority property through the tax credit program and manages affordable units, most of which are housing authority subsidized units.
Okay, thanks so much for the answer. I appreciate that. I do think it's important to find out what the past history is. Can I just ask if that project has been a success or if there have been problems with it?
I really don't see that as anything relevant to this application.
Okay, fair enough. I'll respect your decision. Can I ask who paid for the demolition of the existing site?
I believe it was the Housing Authority. I don't know if they got a grant for it or not, but the Housing Authority, I believe, I couldn't possibly be wrong on that, but I believe it was the Housing Authority.
Okay, I do want to draw to your attention the resolution of the Housing Authority Board where they did, in fact, approve, it looks like a loan of over $1 million to Penrose. And then I'm just not clear on the amount because one of these references says $1.19 million. The other reference says $1.9 million. And I just want to know how much money was loaned to Penrose to demolish the Hoffman Pavilion, and has that money been paid back?
I don't know the answer to that, it's also not relevant.
I think that's a pretty important question.
Not for this board.
Okay, well, could you please ask the developer to address my concern?
I believe you asked the chair and the council for the developer has answered that question.
Actually, he didn't answer. He said that doesn't sound relevant.
No, I
And
answered
he's
it
not
by
the judge of
telling
that,
you.
obviously you are, so
Okay, so it's not relevant to the variance that is being, or, for the site plan that is being asked for tonight.
I also answered the question by telling you don't know the answer.
Okay, but
Maybe
maybe
you don't know the answer.
maybe your client does. Is that fair to say?
I would, it's relevant answers.
Well, call me crazy, I think it's pretty significant whether or not the developer has received a loan of greater than $1 million from the authority that owns the land that they want to build on tonight. And
I mean, Charlie, I would think the best place to get that answer would be from the housing authority. They have the records of that, so.
And I don't know if you've read some of my stories, but it's very hard to get information out of them, as I've been alluding to. I know you don't think it's relevant, but it's
Considering we don't have the information in front of us, it'd be 10 times harder to get it from us than it would be from them.
okay. Well, I'll keep pressing them, that's for sure. The last question I just wanted to ask is the housing authority. Hold on a second, I'm sorry. Bear with me one moment. So, I guess there's no timetable for the project. It's dependent on this HMFA funding. It was stated earlier that there was some urgency to it, though. What is the deadline that has to be met? Would the board be able to table this? Or would this cancel out the possibility of getting the HMFA funding? Or could the board?
Well, I don't object to a basis to table this for whatever reason, but yes, there is an application deadline with HMFA.
And the deadline being?
Beginning of May.
Beginning of May. I just feel like this project's being rushed through because I know that the city council is about to approve a tax abatement for it at their next meeting, and I just, I don't understand. If the site's been lying fallow for years, I just think it would make sense to get the housing authority to say whether or not this $1 million plus loan has been paid back by the developer before this board considers it. Call me crazy, that's what I think. You don't have to agree with me. The last question is about the list, the waiting list that the housing authority is going to use. Is that a public document?
This board doesn't know, and Charlie, I mean, you know that. I mean, ask the housing authority. You're at every one of their meetings.
I've been asking. I filed an open request in 2015.
You know the answer here is that this is the zoning board, and this board, this staff here doesn't have access to the housing authority's waiting list for their units. That's a housing authority question. You know that. You've been around that.
Okay, well, they've got a whole public meeting for me to be able to attend, and they couldn't do it last month.
We can't help you out with that one either.
Okay, well, but you're approving a big building on their land, so it would be nice to have a representative here, that's all I wanted to say. I do think you should hold off on approving this. I do think that it was not right to consider these old variances still in effect. I'm not an expert on the law, maybe I could get the citation from your attorney, but I do think that the parking has fundamentally changed at the very least, that now there's an entrance and an exit to the place instead of just one way in, one way out. And obviously the conditions have changed.
That's a site plan issue where the parking was in, and that is part of what the board is considering.
But I believe the attorneys came to an agreement that that variance is already approved and no testimony required.
That is a site plan issue. You're asking about the parking variance, which is the number of parking spaces. Circulation on the site is a site plan issue, and that is part of what the board considers.
Okay. Well, again, I'm not an expert on the law, but I think it would make sense to have evaluated all the variances in full, because it's been several years and the situation has changed. It's gotten, I would say, harder to park in the area since then. I think it was a mistake to kind of say that so many of the variances are already approved. And I'm sorry to bring up one more point. The issue of flooding, apparently the DEP is going to have to approve this. We're talking 83% impervious coverage. That's one of the biggest numbers I've seen in all my time covering these meetings. And can I just ask, has this particular site flooded during any of the hurricanes, Floyd, Irene, Sandy? This particular 75 Nelson Street, has this low-lying area flooded during those hurricanes?
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's why it's built.
That's why there's only one unit on the ground floor, and you think that, I guess the applicant thinks that would be sufficient?
These are the same issues that affected the Riverside project right next door, and the design, the house, the design takes it into account. What gets looked at to comply with those kinds of rules.
Okay, well, I was pleased to hear that it's going to be up to some environmental standards, but I just know that, you know, Riverside didn't have 83% impervious coverage, and I do think if this is a flood zone, you know, perhaps the impervious coverage is too much, and yet another reason to table the application. I don't know if you'll still be able to make the deadline, but I do think that it shouldn't be rushed through and it should be evaluated. So thank you for your time.
Any other member of the public have questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting for discussion. Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, we'll make a positive recommendation on the application. The following conditions be attached to the approval resolution. Compliance with the terms of the city engineer report dated March 25th, 2017. All necessary easements and/or cross-access agreements for review and approval by the board attorney and city engineer prior to filing the same. Payment of site performance bond amount to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer. Submission of site inspection escrow deposit